In this video, we will show you how to replace your rear axle on this Ford Fusion. This will be located behind your rear wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've done so, continue on to removing all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, we have a clear view of our axle nut, located right in the center of your rear brakes. Use a 32mm to remove this nut. Go ahead and give that a quick inspection and recycle it. Let's get some penetrant in this area. Continue on with a hammer and punch. Directly in the center of this axle, you'll find a small hole. Go ahead and tap on this area to break the axle free from the wheel bearing. Once you see some movement from this area, we'll continue on to dislodging our ABS sensor mounting bracket. This bracket is held in place with a 13mm headed mounting nut along the back side. It's a little difficult to see. We'll just use a ratcheting wrench for this. Quick inspection of that mounting nut. Set it aside. We will be reusing it. Take hold of the wiring harness. Separate that. Give it a quick inspection. Make your way underneath the lower control arm. We're going to apply a little bit of support here. We don't need to lift it up. We're just supporting this area. Once you've done that, continue on at your lower shock mounting point. We'll be using an 18mm to remove this bolt. Looking along the rearward side, you will find that you have a nut which has a little wing that flips off towards the side. Go ahead and remove the nut. We'll remove this vibration dampener and the mounting bolt. We'll use a small pry bar. While we're down in this area, the next thing we'll do is move along to removing each of these 4 18mm headed mounting nuts. On the outboard side, you will find that you have studs that make their way through a bracket. Let's make our way out here. We'll have a 15mm headed mounting bolt that makes its way through from the rear towards the front of the control arm. There's an 18mm nut on the back side. Let's continue driving this out of here. Now let's make our way to our upper mounting point. As for this 15mm headed bolt, we're not going to remove it. You only need to loosen it enough that we can take this and pivot it outward so we can start removing the axle from the back of the wheel bearing. We'll be using the same tools for this. Now that we've done that, let's start paying attention along this forward area again. We'll have to separate this. At the same time as doing this, we have to do a couple other things. We'll be paying special attention to our ABS wire at all times. Aside from that, we'll have to take hold of this backing plate, start pulling it outward while pushing the axle in and out through the bearing. There we are. Let's carefully hang this aside, putting no pressure on our ABS wire flex hose or emergency brake cable. The next thing we'll have to do is separate the axle from the rear differential. Keep in mind, there could be fluid in this area. Make sure you have a collection bucket under the area. You can use a prying device for this. We'll use this in between the differential and the axle and gently pry this out of place. Now that we've done so, we'll continue on by pulling this out of the vehicle. There it is, friend. Once you have the axle out of the rear differential, it's important to clean and inspect the seal area. Double check and make sure it's soft and pliable and it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. All right, let's get ready for the installation of our brand new rear axle. Carefully take this and put it in position. Placing it into the rear differential, we'll make sure it's as straight as possible and then carefully drive it in. Once you feel as though you have it in place, double check to make sure it's completely secure. We're taking hold of this area, try to pull it out of place. If it slides out, it's not locked in. Assuming it does not, we can continue. Remove the axle nut, we'll set that aside. Continue on with some anti-seize along the splined area here. This is the area that will slide into the back of the wheel bearing. We do not need to apply any anti-seize on the threaded area. That's for the locking nut. Let's take hold of this. We'll carefully start putting the axle along the back side here and slide it into the back of the wheel bearing. Pay attention to your ABS wire at all times throughout this entire process. At this point, we're going to start aligning everything as needed. There we are. Now that we have that in place, let's start on each of our 4 mounting nuts. At this point, we'll continue on to our rearward bolt. You may have to raise or lower the rear control arm to align this properly. Let's resecure the lower shock to the lower knuckle. Continue on with your vibration dampener and your locking nut. It's in position here. Before we continue tightening anything, it's important to mention, you want to have your suspension in the original ride height position without the suspension hanging. Essentially, while we're up in the air, we're going to put pressure underneath the lower control arm, bringing it up into the original ride height position. We'll snug this bolt and torque it to 85 foot-pounds. Once you've done that, continue on to these 4 mounting nuts. Snug each of those and torque those to 66 foot-pounds. Let's make our way back here. We'll torque this to 81 foot-pounds. Now we'll make our way up here and do the exact same thing. Torque that to 81 foot-pounds as well. Remove support from under your lower control arm. Time for the ABS wire. We'll take this and put it in position. When you put this in position, you will find that you do have a small tab. That tab will fit into its corresponding hole in the bracket here. Start on the mounting nut, snug it up. Double check to make sure your ABS wire is completely secured. Let's move along to our axle nut. We'll start this on and bottom it out by hand. Never use an impact gun when you're trying to install something like this. You could potentially damage your bearing. Once you have it snug, we'll get this lower to the ground and we can torque it to 188 foot-pounds. Now that I have this snug, I brought it a little closer to the ground. I took one of my pry bars and I came straight across my lug studs, being careful not to damage the threading, diagonally all the way down to the ground. That'll prevent this from spinning. Now we can torque this to 188 foot-pounds. The next thing you'll want to pay attention to once you have that torqued is the small notch that's in the axle shaft itself. We're going to take a hammer and punch and come directly in the center of that, driving the nut down into that groove, locking the nut in place. Let's just give this one last inspection and reinstall our wheel. Continue on to all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. We'll bottom these out, get the wheel safely back down on the ground, and torque each of them to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely back down on the ground, we'll torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friend, we showed you how to install your rear axle. The process for one side of the vehicle is the exact same thing as the other. Aside from that, you want to go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test, listen for funny noises, and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.